Hi everybody and welcome to another piano comparison video here on the Merriam Pianos YouTube channel. My name is Stu Harrison and in today's video we're comparing Roland's FP-90X and FP-60X. They're two brothers in the FP lineup. There are some similarities, but man, there are some very big differences in the playing experience. And we're so grateful to be able to share some of those opinions and findings with you today. So if you are in the market for a digital piano, an all-in-oneer with speakers on board, great sets of sounds, you will want to stick around and watch this video. If it's the first time you're finding us here on YouTube, thank you for stopping by and please do subscribe because we would love to have you back for more. Hit that notification bell because that means every single time we come out with a new video, you're going to get a reminder in your browser. You'll be able to come back and see us again. So let's get started with this comparison of the 90X and the 60X right away. So we've got white spy, black spy. I don't know why, just made a mad reference. Anyway, we've got the FP-60X in white over here and the FP-90X in black on my left. We've already done the FP-90X ES920 comparison. That was one that we were really waiting to do while we were, because we were behind on having this 90X in. The FP-90X versus the 60X was another comparison that we were really eager to do. So today we're checking that one off the box. It was very interesting to get these two side by side because there are so many differences between them. Even though they are part of the FP series, they're much more distant cousins, I guess you could say, than comparing the 60 to 30 or the 30 to the 10. The 90 sort of sits apart from all of them from a spec standpoint. And because of that, from a musical standpoint as well, they really are quite different. This is deceiving because the user interface on the 90 and the 60 are so close. In fact, a quick glance and you'd be forgiven for mistaking the two. They have exactly the same user interface panel with one or two very subtle exceptions. And they, their shape is about the same. They come in the same colors. There is, of course, depending on your market, anywhere from a $700 to $1,000 difference in price between these two. So that you won't mistake. So what are the differences between them? Of course, we're going to talk about those differences, but we also want to play those differences so that you can hear it as best as possible. As always, we are taking line outs of both of these instruments, stereo, but we are also recording both of these with stereo microphones. So throughout the review, you are going to see in the lower titles when you are hearing line outs versus when you are hearing the microphones. And the microphones are literally just over my head, just out of frame of camera, so they're not that far away. And we have not affected any of the sound that you're going to be hearing at home. So let's get to some of those differences. And we're going to start with sound first, then we'll move to action. We'll move to sort of other more functional features or utilitarian features for our third section. So beginning with sound, the FP-60X and the FP-90X have two very different speaker systems. So if you are using this in a room and you're not using headphones, the speakers are going to present the tone in a very different way. We've got 2 speakers over here, 4 speakers over here, 26 watts of rated output power versus 60 watts of rated output power. And can you hear the difference? Here's a sample. We've got the 60X first. So both of those speakers were set to the same volume, but it isn't just the volume differences that I hear, because of course you definitely could hear that there was more presence, that there was, or at least I'm hoping that that's coming through at home, that there's just more presence, that there's more volume for sure out of the 60 watt. I mean, that's kind of just like a duh, of course. But it's beyond that. There's a detail, and there's a tightness, and there's a just a cured sound, for, I don't know, lack of a better word, that you're getting out of the 90 that you don't get out of the 60. It's just not nearly as refined. It's like listening to kind of a cheap set of speakers versus something where you've got so much more frequency response that's even and just broader based. So let's break that down a little more specifically. I'm going to go back to the piano tone, and on the piano tone we're using the My Stage Hall stage setting for people who are really specifically wondering exactly what we've got set. We haven't edited that, it's just Hall stage, and we're on the acoustic piano. So we'll go back to the same one. So there's a few things. The trebles are a lot cleaner and a lot more detailed on the 90 than the 60. There's almost like there's a couple of frequency shelves that I'm missing over here that I'm getting over there. But there's also a fidelity issue, not issue, difference, fidelity difference between the two. There's a bit of a sludginess to the top end of the treble you're hearing over here in comparison to the 90. For people who are used to doing any audio mixing, even at a basic sort of home hobbyist level, it's not dissimilar to listening to an MP3 that's been encoded at a lower bit rate versus listening to some kind of a WAV or even a lossless file format. There's just an evenness to the decay, particularly in the very top of the sound on the 90. Now, some of that is the function of the speaker and the amplifier system. Some of that is the tone generator. So let's get to the tone generator next. This is using their supernatural piano tone engine, but it does not have modeling. This has their newest incarnation of the piano modeling, the vPiano technology is as sometimes referred. And so it is outputting tone at a higher fidelity, and it's being generated with real-time computer algorithm versus drawing from a sample. Now, in the most extreme cases, best modeler and sort of best incarnation of sampling out there, which is really what you get when you get into the high-end VSTs, those plugins that you can work with on Pro Tools and Logic, it really is quite a horse race. You've got things like Piano Tech versus, you know, Vienna Symphonic Library or Garriton or the Ravenscroft or any of those ones where it's like, you know, the sampling really does put up a really big fight, and there are some things to like and prefer about sampling. But we're not even apples to apples here, because this is not exactly the best version of sampling you can get. This is, you know, downgraded. Just keep in mind that for, you know, $1,500 to $1,800, depending on your market, you're getting an action, you're getting a case, you're getting speakers, you're getting amplifiers, you know, a tone source, like all kinds of things thrown in there for $1,500. So you're not going to get everything for the price point. But there is that difference in the tone generator. And when you listen to this with headphones, so you're eliminating the speakers as a factor, what you hear out of the sample is actually more trebly and a little more piercing in the top end than what you get on the FP-90X. So even though on the speakers, the treble is sounding more detailed, and you're not getting as much treble out of here through the speakers, the treble's very prominent, but just not nearly as refined and not as sculpted as what you get on there. So there's a difference between the speaker experience. There's also a difference as in the signal experience as well between those two pianos. They're both trying for, I don't know, for a lack of a better expression, a Roland piano tone. I mean, Roland has a specific sound, Yamaha has a specific sound, Kawai has a specific sound. They all kind of have unique signature acoustic piano, you know, tonalities or timbres that people like or don't like. So Roland has that. They're both going for that. But in execution, they both wind up with slightly different results. In piano mode, because of that modeler, you have unlimited polyphony on the 90. You have a polyphony limit of 256 on the 60, which in both cases, in most practical settings, doesn't mean much to anybody because you're not going to hit either one of those limits with any kind of real-life, realistic playing capacity. What I've often said in other videos is the maximum polyphony is more of a benchmark, more of a gauge of just generally how equipped and how fast the tone generator generally is. It's kind of like a maximum speed limit. Even if you never hit that speed limit, a car's maximum speed limit can be a predictor just of how it behaves even at other speeds. So that's kind of how I see it. The selection of tones between these two is quite similar, and I'm going to play through a few of them. So we've already heard one of the acoustic pianos. But there are many other acoustic pianos on there other than concert piano, which is what we were just listening to, ballad piano. Mellow piano. Bright piano, upright piano, rock piano. A lot of these are older patches that Roland has carried on from earlier models. Bright forte, SA piano. It's like my Supertramp meets Cirque du Soleil. Let me know how you, what you thought of that. Then we get into E-pianos. Yeah, and whirlies. Yeah, a few really beautiful really nice full tones. It goes on and on and on. If we include the General MIDI 2 patch bank into the mix, it's well over 300 sounds that you get on both of these. And once you get out of acoustic piano, both are using the same chip set. It's both on the BMC chip. So aside from acoustic piano, most of these should actually sound the same when we output signal. So if we go on the 1976 suitcase, and we'll make sure that Lee is just taking a line out here, so we're eliminating speakers. Should essentially have the same thing. So we'll be dealing with a lot of the other functions in our third section, but in terms of sound, in terms of what you're getting, those are really the critical points to be aware of. We've got the speaker system difference, 25 watts versus, no, sorry, 26 watts versus the 60 watts, 2 speakers versus 4 speakers. A much clearer and better sculpted, tighter sound presentation out of the 90X than we get out of the 60X. We also have the tone generator difference when we're talking about the core acoustic piano sound. We've got full pure modeling, pure acoustic modeling on the 90. We still have the perfectly usable, perfectly good supernatural piano engine happening on the 60. But quite a difference in how it presents the treble. I mean, other people can chime in here, but that's where I hear the greatest difference on the acoustic piano tone between these two tone engines is what's going on in the treble and what's going on in the decay and the bloom of the note when you're hitting it. It's really quite remarkable, the difference, particularly when you have the advantage of a side-by-side comparison. And then besides that, some really great EP pads, some great organ string pads, and those are identical between the two. So for anyone thinking, oh, I wish he'd done some stuff on the 90, everything you're hearing on the 60 is exactly the same on the 90, because once we get out of that acoustic thing, as I just said, no difference in the tone engine. And of course, some other synths. There's, like I said, hundreds on there, so we're not going to play through all of these. And we have done individual reviews of both of these instruments where we do get a little more detailed, particularly I think the one that we did on the 60. So we're going to be back in just a second. We're going to talk about the actions next, because that is as different as the sound. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you in a minute. So I feel like we've made this comparison multiple times on multiple reviews, but I have to remind myself that there are a number of people who watch these reviews where this video could be the very first time that they're accessing any of our reviews, or potentially the very first review of this kind from any channel. They're fresh to the piano market and they are just diving into this information. So we are once again going to talk about the differences between the PHA-4 and the PHA-50. They are, I guess depending on your perspective and your background as a player, these are either pretty subtle academic differences or there are monumental differences that might completely sway your decision. So the PHA-4 from Roland is an all-plastic action. That's not unusual. Pretty much every action on the planet underneath about a $2,000 price point, with only a few exceptions, are plastic from all companies. The PHA-4 hit the market in the mid to late 2010s, and there were a few things about this action that made it stand out. One, it was a triple sensor. So triple sensors are basically the way in which a key action, or sensors generally, is the way in which a key action translates your physical motion into ones and zeros, and in pretty much all cases, specifically value between 0 and 127 to be, it's part of the MIDI language. This is how all of these things communicate with one another between components. And the triple sensor really means that there's 3 points at which that key gets measured. Or three ways or 3 points at which it gets measured. And that really helps for times where there's a lot of repetition going on, things like this. That's going to be more accurate with a triple sensor than a dual sensor for sure, but it also happens when you have really quickly repeated notes, like with octaves. And then there are some instances where it can also help just with normal playing in terms of the accuracy of the MIDI information you get. So it had that, and that was pretty unusual for the price points that you could get a PHA-4 action. The FP-10 may be the most notable example, because this is like well under $1,000. $600-700 for this piano, and you're getting a triple sensor. And then the second differentiator was it had escapement. And some people consider escapement to be a big factor. Other people just are sick and tired of hearing about escapement from reviewers like myself, or reading about it. It's like, geez, get over the escapement thing. So again, this depends on your background as a player. Can you feel it? Yeah. Does the fact that you can feel it, unto itself, is that a big deal? Probably not. It's more of a novelty thing. Oh, cool, it feels the thing like when you play the acoustic piano. But the practical benefit that I have found, and I've mentioned this in many videos now, is that that extra little bump actually translates into better lower dynamic control. And I really only became aware of that after playing honestly thousands of hours on digital pianos that had it and had not, and started to become acutely aware that I had much better control in my pianissimo range on pianos that had that escapement. So I'm saying that's where the benefit is. I have no idea if anyone else shares that opinion, but that's where I see the benefit. So the PHA-4 had that triple sensor, had the escapement. It's a plastic action, so the cost is lower. It's a lighter keyboard as well, so it's not adding weight. Like all plastic actions, it probably means at some point that this is not going to be as durable or last as long as some of the longer key stick wooden key actions that are out there. The ones that Kawai have in, say, the VPC-1 or MP-11. I mean, these actions are literally just a stick of wood. There's no hinge. It's just balancing on a rail. Like, those are going to last for thousands and thousands of hours. Even the original one, like the Kawai MP-9500, I think it was, that had some of the first wood actions. I mean, they're still out there 20 years, 20 plus years later. So good chance that something like this in an action won't get as many hours of use as a wood action, but it's still quite durable, and it's been doing very well out in the world marketplace. So that's what the FP-60 has. The PHA-50 is an action that was released, I think, at about the same time. And its predecessor was, I think, the PHA-4 Concert. They sort of like standardized the PHA-4. It used to have a whole bunch of different levels. So Roland's been working on this version for a while, and they keep sort of extending the key length to get it more and more like a grand. So the PHA-50 now goes in their RD-2000, it goes in the FP-90, goes in HP-704 and LX-705, and there are a few. I'm probably forgetting or missing a couple. The Keola. Anyway, sort of their upper mid range action. And it has wood core in the key. The key is quite a bit longer, so the geometry is now mimicking that of sort of a larger upright, or I suppose a very, very small grand, but it isn't quite the same pivot length as a grand. And there are stabilizer pins that sit right in the middle of the back of the key, just in front of the hinge. Really increases the lateral stability of the key. You can feel it when you play. But because of that extended key length, it also just, you don't feel the mechanics nearly as much generally as in the PHA-4. So it's a very different playing experience between these two actions. They both have escapement, they both have the triple sensor, but the physical motion of the key is different, and depends on how specific your playing preferences are. If you've never played piano before, if this is your first keyboard, first weighted 88-note digital piano, maybe you're moving up from a keyboard, there's a very good chance that any action from any company that's well built and well designed, you'll probably grow into and really enjoy. And so I think the PHA-4 fits into that category. If you already have acoustic playing experience, or you've already been playing digital pianos for a while and really have a refined sense of what you enjoy, the PHA-50, I think, is a standard that you are going to want to get to kind of at a minimum. My personal opinion. Both actions have a textured ivory look to it. It's not too extreme. It's not as extreme as what Casio's done, but it does have a nice glide to it while still giving you some texture. Even in the hottest, sweatiest playing situations, it still manages to absorb some of that moisture, which is great. Black keys have a bit of a texture to it as well. So that's the action. We're going to be back with the third section. We're going to get into all the other stuff like Bluetooth and USB MIDI and the ports on the back and the stands. So once again, thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you in a second. In the first section, I mentioned that these two have a very similar interface. In fact, it's virtually identical with a few very minor exceptions. So let's just go across the interface and talk about that. Besides the volume slider, which I think is probably fairly self-explanatory, you hit a 3-band equalizer. And there are going to be some people who are unfamiliar with the benefits of a 3-band equalizer. I will quickly, very quickly, demonstrate what a 3-band equalizer can do. So right now it's flat, meaning that there isn't anything that's been emphasized or de-emphasized. So, but listen to the dramatic effect on the sound that just bringing one of those bands down can have. So I'm just going to totally kill the high. Hear how it just suddenly sounds more dull? There it is. There it's not. The mids. Sort of sounds like a cheap set of computer speakers from the 1990s. And then your lows, kill your lows. Now you're dealing with an AM radio. I think this is an awesome feature. It's available on both. The first time I ever saw this, I think, was on a Yamaha CP300. Those just gigantic tanks of a keyboard. I had a gig playing keyboards at Second City, which is a comedy club, and one of the boards they had was this huge, big CP300 thing, and it had the low, mid, high equalizer there on the left side, and I found it so handy. And I'm very glad to see that this is starting to proliferate across many of the other brands. Kawai now has it. Roland included it on the first incarnation of the 6090. I know Yamaha continues to offer it on several of theirs. It's just such an easy way to quickly tweak a piano tone to your liking, and especially if you're dealing with PA or some other kind of a sound situation where something's just too boomy or too peaky or whatever it is. No mucking in a menu, just quick tactile controls. They both have that. They both have the ability to manage lower and upper voice control. That is for when you are blending two sounds together or you've split the keyboard into two, which both of these models have the ability to do. You've got the split dual and also the transpose button, which is right next to there. We've already talked about the sounds themselves. You do have some registration features, which means you can save your own presets for easy and quick recall. Both of these have Bluetooth audio and Bluetooth MIDI. And so this means that you can broadcast Bluetooth audio to these instruments, as in your mobile phone, tablet. Nobody does this with tablet anymore. But anyway, probably mobile phone. You've got your Spotify or your Apple Music or whatever it is, and you want to play something through the speakers. So many scenarios where this actually makes a whole lot of sense. If you've got this in a bedroom, a dorm room, even sometimes at a gig and you want to play along with a sequence or a track and you don't want cables or whatever, have it come through the speaker system. Bluetooth, so easy to pair, shows up in your list as a separate, FP-90X audio instead of the data connection. Bluetooth MIDI, which means that's a two-way sort of communication protocol, so it's just like plugging in a MIDI cable. That's also very handy. You've got metronome control, you've got a basic recorder, and you can record in both MIDI as well as WAV. You can't record in MP3. That's something that Kawai offers that I think is kind of handy, but Roland has a really big advantage in that department, which is that this is also equipped, both of them, with a USB MIDI interface, meaning you can plug this in with a USB cable to a computer and it will pick this up as a digital sound source. You do not necessarily have to use audio cables to get this into your computer or to play digital audio from your computer back to this either. So if you're using this on a gig and you have this, mated with some sort of a DAW on a laptop, no cables needed besides, of course, the one USB cable. But there's a lot you can do with that USB cable. We come to the only difference in the user interface between these two, which is that this has a song volume slider on it for song playback, and that would usually be if you've got a song that you've got plugged in through a USB stick or something like that. You can mix that in separately. They both have microphone volumes as well as microphone gain control on the back. So that's kind of a full review of some of the front-end features. In terms of ports, this has a USB-A and a USB-B type connection. That's for, you know, sending stuff to computer or plugging in USB keys here. It has support for a 3-pedal system. It also has a 3.5 mil audio input, so if you don't want to send in Bluetooth audio, for whatever reason, you don't have to. It's got the old school 5-pin DIN MIDI cables, 5-pin DIN. MIDI cables, if you want to use that as well for any reason you're dealing with some older equipment, it's going to be kind of backwards compatible that way. Both of these instruments are available with matching stands and with a matching 3-pedal system. You can also get a floating 3-pedal system that work with both of these. So that's kind of a rundown of how these two compare. So for people who are looking at one or both of these or other instruments in this price range, this is not going to be the easiest choice, because I think Roland has appropriately priced the gap here for the difference in the features. If this was a lot closer in price, I'd be like, oh yeah, no brainer. Just spring for the FP-90. Forget the FP-60. So many other things on the FP-90 that outgun the FP-60. But it's a significant gap. I mean, we're up here in Toronto, Canada. That means in Canadian bucks, Canuck bucks, it's $1,000 difference between these two pianos. That's not insignificant. I have a feeling in the States that means the gap is probably somewhere in the $700 to $800 range. Not insignificant. So we have a difference in the action, PHA 4, PHA 50. If you have experience before on acoustics, you are going to probably not settle for anything less than the PHA 50. That's my thought. You've got a difference in speakers. So if you're thinking about using this on gigs in a professional setting, the 60 watts is strong enough that you could probably get away with no sound reinforcement in certain settings. Whereas this, you're going to be pushing the speakers for anything except kind of personal use in a small or maybe sort of a medium-sized room. You've got a fidelity difference in the chipset. So if you were thinking about using this for recording as a sound source, I'm not getting into the sampling versus modeling debate, because as I said at the beginning of this isn't exactly an apples to apples. This is not the best version of sampling, and this is a slightly better, but still not the best version of modeling that you can get out there. But looking at these two specific examples, the quality of the sound out of this chip, out of this machine, is just better objectively to my ear, either through the speakers or through that. So you've got that difference. There's a slight difference in weight, but I don't think meaningful enough that one would, you know, anybody's going to kibosh one versus the other for being too heavy or, you know, because one is a whole lot lighter than the other. They're not like dramatically different. So there's some chunky stuff in there to figure out whether it's worth the extra money or not. The FP-90X is, I think, the most expensive all-in-one unit that's currently out on the market. So it is the primo. It is, at least Roland would like to think of it as the Cadillac of this category. You know, you are getting a lot there, especially if you really like the action. So there's our comparison between these two. I hope that it has been helpful. Certainly, you have been very patient in waiting for this comparison, and we are so grateful to finally be able to do it, to explore these two instruments side by side ourselves. My name is Stu Harrison. This has been Merriam Pianos on YouTube. We really sincerely appreciate that you've joined us for this review and hope you found it helpful. If you have, we would appreciate if you subscribed, become part of our community, hit that notification bell so that you know about every other video that we come out with. We are always coming out with new piano-related and piano music-related videos, and we hope you'll enjoy others in the future with us. Thank you so much. Have yourselves a great day.